What's up, everybody? I'm Mark Hudson. This is Campfire Apologetics. It is my prayer and my hope that God uses this content to edify, but to also give confidence to the everyday Christian who maybe has a hard time sharing their faith. Maybe they're nervous or weary about sharing their faith with unbelievers or even with believers about tough theological issues. And so that is the hope of this podcast. And so don't forget to look for me on Instagram, on TikTok. I'm on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. I think that's about it. But anyway, share those pages to the glory of God. And again, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. All right. Well, welcome back to another episode of Campfire Apologetics, where I help equip the everyday Christian with tools to help defend their faith in an increasingly hostile culture. I'm your host, Mark Hudson, and today is I'm pretty excited about. We're going to be talking about the New Age and New Thought and kind of Eastern mysticism and all these different things that are all kind of tied together. And I'm joined by Marcia Montenegro. I'm hoping I'm saying that correctly.
A lot of people say Marcia. It's actually Marcia, but
Oh, is it
yeah,
Marcia?
it's Marcia. But
Okay.
I don't really care. So
All right. Yeah. No.
you can say it either way.
All right. Yeah, Marcia. Well, I'll go with Marcia then. Marcia Montenegro. I've always heard everybody say Marcia, so
Yeah,
yeah. My
yeah,
apologies.
that's what most people do say when they see it. Yeah,
Oh, yeah, all right. Well, no worries.
blame my mother.
Okay. All right, yeah, right. So, all right, Marcia Montenegro, and so she has spent a significant amount of time in the New Age, and she runs the website Christian Answers for the New Age as well. And so, I'll turn it over to you, Marcia. I'll let you kind of introduce yourself. Because like I said earlier
Okay.
before we started recording, I'll probably miss something and you know, not represent you properly. So I'll let you go ahead and tell us about yourself.
Okay. Okay. Thank you so much, Mark. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure.
Um, yes, I was raised. Just to give, I'm going to give a kind of a brief testimony here.
Yeah.
I was raised going to various churches. My mother was I would say, a nominal Southern Baptist.
Mhm.
My father was an agnostic. So he definitely was not a Christian. I still don't know to this day if my mother was a Christian when I was growing up. So I tend to think she wasn't, but I'm not sure. She didn't really, like, I never saw her pray and I never saw her read the Bible, and she never told me to read the Bible,
Yeah.
but she did think children should go to church. So my sister and I were taken to churches. Sometimes my mother went to the church, sometimes not, but we always had to go. And we moved around. We lived in different places. My father was in the U.S. Foreign Service. Basically, he was a diplomat.
Yeah.
So we lived overseas, and we lived in Washington, D.C. And so there wasn't any consistent kind of church that I went to. They were usually very generic type churches overseas. Like in Berlin, we went to the Army, the Army Protestant service, because you
Yeah.
had a choice of Jewish, Catholic, or Protestant. That was your
Oh,
choice.
okay. Yeah.
So, we were taken to the Protestant services and the Protestant Sunday school, of which I have very little memory. But after we came back to Washington, D.C., when I was a little bit older, we lived in Maryland, and I went to a Baptist church. My sister and I went. And I went to Sunday school, and I went to the service, and I went to the youth group. So I was involved in that sense, but I was not a Christian. I was going mainly because my mother was, basically telling me and my sister to go, and we kind of had to go. She would drive us there. So we had to go, or we
Yeah.
would walk. Actually, we were able to walk there from where we lived. But I went there. It was really just Christianity to me was about being good to get into heaven. And that kind of began to get tiring to me. I started questioning it, questioning the idea of hell, questioning, the idea of the Bible being really actually being that important. I don't think I ever even understood it was God's word. I mean, I'm sure I heard that, but I don't even remember thinking that. So I'm not sure I really understood that. But I had friends in high school who were different religions, and they were very dedicated to their beliefs. And so I started questioning why should I follow Christianity? Why can't I just choose what I want? And I kind of made that decision when I was about 15. And so even though I went to church until I got out of high school, I was not really, I was not really thinking that that was what I wanted to believe. And I basically actually had rejected it. And I decided that I would pursue different spiritual paths when I was older. In college, I got very interested in Eastern religions. I did a project on Gandhi. I got very interested in Gandhi and Hinduism. And I had always been interested, not always, but starting when I was younger, I'd been interested in astrology and the supernatural, and like what was called the power, the powers of the mind. At that time, they called it
Right.
ESP,
Okay.
extrasensory perception. And they
Okay.
were doing experiments on it at Duke University to prove that some people had ESP. And this was actually very well known at the time. It was kind of a famous thing going on. And so I was interested in all of that. And in college, I didn't have a lot of time to pursue it, but I had friends who were interested. I had a friend who said she could see auras. You should see these lights around people, different colored lights, and they mean different things.
Mm.
And knew another woman who did tarot cards. So I didn't pursue anything seriously, but I was kind of the person to consult on astrology. So I would have friends who would ask me, they would ask me things like, it usually had to do with relationships, like, well, Marcia, you know that I'm a Capricorn, and John is a Pisces. Do you think we can get along? So is
Right.
that kind of,
Yeah.
it's kind of like the astrology romance advice here.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
Um, and I didn't know that much, but I guess I knew enough that people thought I knew something. So after college, I had some experiences in college, some paranormal experiences, including going out of my body, including having what I would call psychic experiences. And so after college, also, I thought I saw a dead person when I was at my grandmother's house. I was on, Easter break or something like that. And I thought I saw this person appeared to me and told me when he died. So after college, I got very interested in contacting the dead and
Okay.
communication from the dead. I did a lot of reading on that. I mean, a whole lot of reading. I was also reading on Eastern religions, like on Hinduism.
Right.
And this went on for several years. I went to, a few psychics and people like that. And then I finally decided I really wanted to study something seriously. And I wanted to actually have a tool that I could use to help people. And so I took some classes. I took astrology. I took psychic development class. And I pursued the astrology and actually became a professional astrologer. And the way I did that was that in Atlanta, they had a very unusual situation where the astrologers had gotten together with someone from the city council, and they came up with this law or city ordinance that in order to practice astrology in the city limits, you had to have a business license. But to have the business license, you had to prove you knew astrology. And this was all done to make astrology legal because it was illegal at the time.
Right.
And it was illegal because there were a lot of scam artists and it was classified under fortune telling, and fortune telling was illegal. And actually, a lot of people probably don't know this, but your city may have it on the books that fortune telling is illegal. It's very, very common across the country.
Oh,
And
okay.
so it's probably true wherever you live that may be classified as illegal, and astrology would be fortune telling. Now they probably don't enforce it usually, unless you're in an area like New York City. There's a lot of scam artists there, and they do enforce things like that there. But anyway, so in order to make it possible for people who really, quote unquote, knew astrology to practice it, they had this set up. So I took a 7-hour exam, and along with some other people, and passed it and purchased my business license and started practicing as an astrologer.
Oh, wow.
Now, prior to that, a few years before that, I had gone to a class called Inner Light Consciousness, and that class included a guided meditation or guided visualization. And during that process, at the end of the class, we were introduced to our spiritual master, which basically is a spirit guide. And it was through this guided visualization. So I had this spirit guide. So by the time I was doing astrology, that had already happened with the spirit guide about 4 years earlier. And I also had done some Tibetan. I'd gone to a Tibetan Buddhist group and learned Tibetan Buddhist meditation. And then I went after a year or so of that, I got into Zen Buddhism. So I was doing Buddhist meditation and had taken classes on numerology and palm reading and past life regression before I became an astrologer. So I was already, kind of deeply into what is called the New Age by the time I became an astrologer.
Okay.
But astrology became my focus, of course. And, I taught astrology and I spoke on astrology. I was part of the Astrological Society and eventually became president. So my life was completely wrapped up in astrology and doing Buddhist meditation and reading a lot of Zen Buddhist literature.
Yeah.
And it touches on other areas because the New Age blends a lot of different things together. So you get exposed to different ideas and read about those as well. And my friends were in different areas, like most of my like astrology friends were not into Buddhism, but they might be into something else. So we all had our own spiritual path. And I definitely was very anti-Christianity, which I thought was very narrow-minded and judgmental.
Right.
So what happened is that I started getting this is out of the blue, really completely out of the blue. I started getting a compulsion to go to a church, and I didn't know why, and I didn't want to go to a church. And this went on for several months. And then finally I gave in and I went to this large church in downtown Atlanta. And just so people know, I am leaving out a lot of stuff that happened. I am
Yeah.
leaving out a ton of stuff.
Sure.
But I do have it on my website, which is, by the way, christiananswersnewage.com. So, or if you just Google Christian Answers for the New Age, my story is there. And I also have, it's also on YouTube on different, interviews I've done. So in more detail, so people can find it there. Anyway, I finally went to this church and I decided that probably I believed in reincarnation. So I decided that there was something from a previous life, from a previous Christian life that was unfinished, that I was supposed to finish or I was supposed to realize. And I thought by going into the church that that would get me to see what it was. And
Yeah.
that's how I talked myself into going into the church.
Okay. Yeah.
So, so I was sitting in the back of the church and the service started. I was going to leave early actually, but the service started. Everyone stood up and there was a procession from the back of the church to the front of the church. This was the choir. I guess it was like some of the choir members and the ministers, the various ministers. It was a fairly large Episcopal church. And
Okay.
at the front of the procession was a young boy carrying a cross. And as he passed me, I felt what I call a waterfall of love coming down and completely enveloping me. And it was as if there was this God telling me that he loved me. Now, God didn't say, I love you, but it was like
Yeah.
this. I call it a waterfall of love. And I didn't know what to make of this because I didn't believe in a personal God, because God to me as a new ager was, this force or energy that we all were a part of and we all had come from and we all would go back to eventually.
Yeah. Right.
So I just stayed for the service and didn't know how to process this at all. But I went back the following Sunday and I continued to go there. I don't know, I don't really know why I continued to go there, but pretty early on, a few people found out I was an astrologer and wanted my business card. So I thought I could get some clients, and I thought,
Yeah.
I'll keep going there because here's another place where I can get some clients.
Right.
And actually, now that I think about it, I don't think any of those people actually asked me to do an astrology chart for them, but I thought that I would get some clients.
Hmm.
Although I did end up speaking to a Sunday school class. Oh, that was one of my clients who asked me. It was another church. I'm sorry. So it wasn't there. But I did speak to a Sunday school class, by the way, that in a
Oh,
church, in a
okay.
Methodist church.
About the
um,
New Age, like astrology?
yeah, yeah. Well,
Oh,
I
okay.
spoke about astrology because one of the members of the church, he and his wife, he was a client of mine. And actually, I need to also include him in this story because he hired me to work part-time in his office to give him information on the employees
Oh,
from their birth dates.
okay.
And so I was doing astrology, but my marriage ended. And so this client, thought I probably needed some income, which I did. And he offered me this part-time job at his office doing that secretly. I mean, nobody else knew that was why I was there.
Oh,
But I
right,
mean, I
right.
had an office and everything. I went in like 20, 25 hours a week. And then I was also doing my astrology.
Mhm.
So that reason I have to tell that is because that plays into what happens later. So I was doing a lot of astrology and of course and very very involved. I was writing for a lot of astrological and new age publications as well. And then so this church thing was like completely separate from my astrology life. And I was just sort of going there and I started getting this impression. Now this is very early on. I went to the church on Labor Day weekend. That's where I had the waterfall of love
Okay.
experience. That was Labor Day weekend, just to give a timeline of how everything happened. Then by sometime in October, I'm getting the impression that God doesn't like astrology. Like he really, really doesn't like it.
Uh-huh.
And here again, it's not a voice or anything. It's just this, I call it an impression. But it was very, very clear. It wasn't a fuzzy impression. This was very, very clear.
Yeah.
And I didn't really like that. So I kind of ignored it because I didn't want to think that something was wrong with astrology. And so I just ignored it, there were a few things that happened there that were kind of strange, but I'm going to skip over them. And then the impression that God didn't like astrology became that God was telling me to give it up. So that was much more intense, because I couldn't ignore that, because that was
Right.
like this constant thing of, you have to stop astrology. You have to
Yeah.
give it up. This, you have to do away with this. And I tried to ignore it. I really tried for a few weeks. I tried.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that probably started in early November or something around there. So finally, the night before Thanksgiving, I made the decision to give it up. So now
Okay.
we're from Labor Day to Thanksgiving. So that's not a very long time.
Right.
It's a little bit of time there, but not a lot. So what, maybe 2.5 months or something, not quite 3 months.
Yeah.
And I actually gave it up, but I wasn't a Christian. I was
Hmm.
still a New Ager who didn't know what was going on.
Yeah.
Um, so I
Yeah.
was like totally in this kind of limbo, spiritual limbo, not sure of anything, didn't know what was happening, had to tell my clients who called me that I wasn't doing astrology anymore. Um, Sometimes if they asked me why, I would say, I don't know, but somehow it's separating me from God. And they would
Okay.
say, how? And I would say, I don't know. So
Uh, yeah.
I had no answers for anybody, including myself. And I was just in this limbo, and I decided, well, okay. And I was still working at that job where I'd been
Hmm.
hired, but my boss was on a leave of absence when this
Okay.
happened.
Right.
So, and he had left busy work for me. So I was just doing busy work, busy administrative
Yeah.
work. And so I couldn't tell him anything. So I was still at that job. And so I decided, okay, I guess I'll start reading the Bible.
You're
I'm going to church.
gonna find
Going,
out why
you know,
God's telling you.
I don't know why.
Yeah.
I still don't know why I did that, but I started reading Matthew. I started in chapter 1, verse 1, and I was reading a little bit every night. And right before Christmas, I started that in sometime in early December. And
Hmm.
right before Christmas, I was in a passage in Matthew chapter 8. And as I was rereading the passage, because the passage sort of captivated me, this was the account of Jesus on the boat, and the storm comes up, and the disciples are scared, and they wake him
Yeah.
up. So
Yeah.
it's also in Mark and in Luke.
Right.
It's longer in Mark. The longer version of it is in Mark. But
Right.
I was reading Matthew. And as I was rereading this, God opened my eyes, and I saw who Jesus was, really, for the first time. I
Wow.
realized who he was. I realized why he died on the cross. I realized I had been going against God my whole life,
Yeah.
and that I needed Christ. And I just turned my life over to Christ at that moment. And
Wow.
so, and I knew that I had become a different person, and my life just drastically changed. I I'd already given astrology up, and I was supposed to teach a class in January. I already had to find a new teacher for that. But now, not only was I not doing astrology, but I was a Christian. So, I mean, that really changed everything even more.
Right.
And I, there's a lot that happened after that. But what I do need to say is that my boss came back in January. I told him I couldn't do, the astrology anymore. He
Right.
was very, very nice. My marriage had ended, and I had a son. So he
Okay.
knew I was a single mother. and he let me stay on and just gave me busy work for a
Oh,
while.
well, there
So
you
I
go.
was still in that office in April when this young man who worked there came into my office. Now, I knew he was a Christian,
Mhm.
and he had befriended me, and used to ask me questions like, what do you think of the music today? Or what do you think of this? And he would just ask me my views, like, what do you think of this?
Right.
And I would tell him, and then he would just kind of listen to me. He knew I was an astrologer, but tried to tell me, he never tried to tell me astrology was wrong or anything like that, or that, I needed Jesus or anything, because, and the reason I think is because I think the Holy Spirit was leading him, and he was being very wise and just listening to me. And on top of that, I found out, this is what I found out he had been doing. He's standing in my office, and I said, I can't believe that a few months ago I was an astrologer and now I'm a Christian, because I didn't want to be a Christian, but now I'm a
Yeah.
Christian.
Oh, wow.
And he kind of smiled and he said, maybe somebody was praying for you. And I said, oh no, I don't know anybody who would pray for me. And then he was smiling, and I realized, oh, wait a minute. I said, were you praying for me? And he said, I was praying for you with my young adult fellowship group at my church.
Oh, wow.
They had been praying for me that whole year when all those things happened.
Yeah.
So he was not, preaching at me, so to speak, or trying to give me the gospel. He was just befriending me and talking to me and praying for me.
Yeah.
I think that he could tell, or else, the Holy Spirit gave him wisdom to see that trying to tell me about Jesus was not going to go anywhere. And it wouldn't have. I would have been very
Yeah.
resistant, and then I wouldn't have wanted to talk to him anymore.
Right. Yeah. Right.
So,
Yeah.
and I could have avoided him. I mean, it was a pretty big office. He wasn't somebody I had to see every day.
Right.
So I think that he just had wisdom from the Lord, and he and his young adult group are praying for me.
Wow. Yeah.
So, this shows that you know, God uses prayer. God can reach anybody. Um, this of course glorified God, because clearly I didn't do anything.
Yeah.
I was resisting it. I was trying to resist it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I did nothing. I was very hardened. I was very hostile to Christianity. God can reach anyone. So, I tell people, if you're praying for someone, if there's somebody really on your heart that you want to see become a believer, a loved one or a friend or a neighbor, coworker, whatever, and they're resistant, that, you can't go up to them and try to talk about Jesus. You feel like that would, or maybe you've tried and that didn't go anywhere. Or they won't come to church with you or whatever, and pray for them, because you
Yeah.
don't know what God is, the one who draws someone.
Yeah.
Jesus said, that my Father is drawing people.
Yeah.
No one comes to me unless the Father draws him.
Right.
So, God God is more than able, obviously,
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
to reach somebody, and you just pray for that person and
Yeah.
trust the Lord, to do what he will do, whatever his will may be. But those people were faithfully praying, not knowing at all what would
Right.
happen,
Yeah. Yeah.
and not seeing anything. Like, he didn't know I had given astrology up when I gave it up.
Right. Right.
I didn't go tell him that.
Yeah.
So, you may not see anything on the surface, but you don't know what God is doing behind the scenes.
Yeah, no, it's prayer is one of those things where it's a kind of a means to an end. God uses the prayers of His people to accomplish His will. And
Yeah.
I think that's
Well, and
it's,
he's glorified through the prayers. Yeah.
yeah,
And I think prayer is very important, of course, for a Christian, because it's our, we need to go to God to petition him and to thank him and to, ask forgiveness, and
yeah,
to, it's a part of our relationship with the Lord. But
Right.
yeah, praying for others. If God puts that on you, and I guess this guy was burdened to pray for me,
Yeah.
and so he was faithful, and he did, and took it to this group, and they were all faithfully praying. Um,
Yeah.
so eventually, after a few years, that led into I did this ministry part time, and then I started doing it full time in 1998. I
Okay.
actually operate as a missionary, and I'm with a mission agency, Fellowship International Mission, which is in Allentown, Pennsylvania, although I
Okay.
live in Virginia.
Right.
And so I've been doing this ministry now for since 1998, however many years. I mean,
Yeah.
that's a long time, full
Yeah.
time. And I have supporting churches and individuals who partner with me. I'm very grateful. It's a very interesting ministry,
Yeah.
and I cover a lot of different areas. I know you're going to ask me about some of those areas.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's awesome. That is you've done a little bit of everything. It sounds like, you know.
yeah. Yeah, I was into a lot of aspects, not all aspects of the New Age, but I encountered a lot of things that I was not into. Like I had a lot of clients who were Wiccans and witches and
Yeah.
neo-pagans.
Yeah.
There was quite a few of them in Atlanta. I had a lot of clients who were into those areas. And so I was even invited to some rituals.
Yeah.
So I I saw that, from not being part of it, but at least encountering it and being around them. And my chiropractor was a witch.
Oh,
She
okay.
actually gave my business card to her clients and promoted me. I got a lot
Oh,
of clients through her.
okay.
And so,
Yeah.
she was one of the people into the witchcraft area that I knew. Um,
Right, right. Yeah, so I guess this is an area that I want to understand more about because I feel like the area that I live in, just the Northeast in general, I think is when it comes to religion or spirituality, I think there's a lot of people that are into the New Age.
yeah.
There's also, I'd say, a good bit of Islam, like Muslims, where I'm at, and probably a lot of atheists as well. But I talk about it on one of my other episodes that it's important to understand the climate that you live in and try to become more of a specialist, in the areas that you're probably going to encounter more where you live. And so I think I've taken more of an interest in the new age because of that. Because a lot of people I talk to, I hear these little nuances come through, either this new thought or new age kind of
Hmm.
thinking. And so it sounds like new age is kind of a like an umbrella term. Like
Hmm.
it kind of encompasses, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like it would be things like Hinduism and Buddhism and Wicca and like neo-paganism, like what you were saying. Like all of those, would you consider to be new age? Like all of those are part of the new age.
I would say, and of course, when you say Hinduism and Buddhism, I would say it's the Western New Age take on those religions, because it's not the
Yeah.
pure essence of those religions. Like I wasn't really practicing Zen Buddhism the way a Zen Buddhist monk would practice it.
Okay,
I
right.
was practicing it as a Western New Ager.
Yeah,
So I
right.
was, it's somewhat watered down, and some
Sure.
elements are changed. For
Sure.
example, in Hinduism, reincarnation is actually considered very negative.
Oh,
It's, because it's a prison, because you have to keep
yeah.
coming back. That's not
Right,
considered a
right.
good thing.
It's like a cycle.
And
You're trying to reach nirvana or whatever, or trying to reach
well, not nirvana, that's Buddhist, but,
Buddhism. Okay, yeah.
yeah, you are trying to eventually, end the reincarnation cycle,
Yeah, right,
but
right.
the idea, and then you get absorbed kind of into, Brahman, the ultimate
Yeah,
God,
okay. Yeah.
which is kind of New Age, where you get absorbed into God, so there's some
Yeah.
parallels, but like in Hinduism, you can come back as an animal. Well,
Right.
in reincarnation in the New Age, nobody ever talks about coming back as an animal. you're always going to come back as a person, in the New Age.
Okay. Yeah, right,
So,
right.
and in Buddhism, they have rebirth, which is a little different from reincarnation. And I won't go into that just for the sake of time, because we're not really talking about Buddhism per se, but it's rebirth, but there's some similarities there. So, I had this Buddhist idea, but I didn't really believe in, for example, that you could be a non-human. You could do rebirth and be what they call a demigod,
Mm-hmm.
or you could be an insect or something. So I didn't buy into that. So it's kind of like it's the New Age take on the Eastern religion, although a
Okay.
lot of the elements that are part of those religions does remain in the New Age. So
Okay.
yeah, I would say what I say about New Age. Now, Wicca and witchcraft I put in a separate category. I put them under the occult. Although
Oh, okay.
even under the occult, I put them in their own category, and I put Satanism in its own category, because they're very different in a lot of ways from the occult,
Right.
and they have their own history and their own worldview that's a little different.
Yeah.
But the thing that happens is a lot of people, for example, in Wicca and witchcraft, also have New Age ideas, or
Right.
they may have been into the New Age and migrated into Wicca and witchcraft,
Kind of
and they
brought
may
over some
retain a
ideas.
lot of their New Age ideas. Yeah, so you can
Yeah.
find people in Wicca and witchcraft who have New Age beliefs, but they're practicing Wicca or witchcraft.
Right. Okay.
And then you find Wicca and witches who are more into just the Wicca and witchcraft and don't really have a lot of the New Age ideas. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of like crossover and blending in and mixing up. But the way I do it is I have the occult, which I define as a set of practices based on Deuteronomy 18, 10, and 11. This is where all the occult practices are listed.
Yeah. I actually have that
There,
listed here as one of
oh,
the in my
oh,
notes. Yeah.
Oh, good, good. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's where people can find, don't do things like divination, casting spells,
Yeah. Yeah.
observing omens, contact with the dead, etc. And
Right.
different Bible translations will use different terms.
Sure.
But if you use a lexicon and look at the Hebrew terms, then you can understand better what it's talking about.
Right.
And so I define the occult based on those practices. And
Yeah.
those are things we see, like astrology, palm reading,
Right.
those are all different forms of divination. Contacting the dead, that would fall under there. Sorcery, doing occult magic, that would fall under there. So all of that is the occult.
Yeah.
And then the New Age, the occult is very focused on the here and now, and how to access whatever supernatural power that you're using in the occult, even the power in the mind, like maybe what a psychic would do. It's all kind of about that. It's more of a here and now kind of worldview. The New Age is very, very future oriented. It's very much oriented towards the idea of spiritual evolution. So
Okay.
you're in a spiritual path, and you're spiritually progressing. Usually reincarnation is involved. So you're
Mhm.
spiritually progressing through different lives and supposedly advancing. That's the whole
Yeah.
idea, is to eventually reach enlightenment. And
Yeah.
so the New Age I define as a network of beliefs based on Gnosticism, Eastern religions, and New Thought. And I know you want to ask me about two of those, so you can,
Yeah.
yeah, we'll get to that. So I'll address those,
Sure.
the Gnosticism and New Thought.
Yeah.
So those three things are the main components of the New Age. And there are people in the New Age that will be maybe in one of those areas, but not the others. And then there are people that will blend even maybe all three areas. I would say that for me, it was more the Gnostic and Eastern religion areas that I was into, although there was some of the New Thought, a little bit of the New Thought. So that the New Age is very open-ended and is much vaster than the other categories, the
Yeah.
occult or witchcraft. And it's just huge. It just encompasses so
Yeah.
much. And the other thing about the New Age is that it has gone mainstream. And it has been mainstream since the 1990s. It has been mainstream. Even, for example, you can find Reiki, which is a
Yeah.
form of energy healing that originally started in Japan.
Yep.
You can find that in major hospitals.
Yeah.
Now
Yeah.
they don't offer it as their main, remedy, but they
Right.
offer it as an alternative.
Right.
You
I've
can
seen that
find,
actually. Yeah.
yeah, I
Yeah.
have too at the hospital, here where I've gone, they have little flyers of different things that they offer that are offered through the hospital. And, one of them's Reiki. So,
Mm.
there it is. There's a flyer on Reiki. You can come get Reiki. And
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
this is just kind of in the culture out there.
Yeah.
Uh, um, just all kinds of things, especially in the healing arts, in the healing area. Acupuncture, which comes from Taoism, it's
Right.
not really medical. So you have all of this stuff in the culture, and then the thinking, the idea of the New Age thinking of things happening like the universe, a lot of people talk about the universe. The universe wanted me to be here, that
Yeah.
kind of thing. There's a
Yeah.
sort of energy or force, that's kind of
Yeah.
guiding things, or that is guiding you, or something like that. So there's just a lot in the New Age, is just really everywhere. And New Thought is too, and that, which is an aspect of which the New Age absorbed. The New Age drew from New Thought, but New Thought's still separate. New Thought's very big in the American culture,
Right.
which I know we're going to talk about. And
Yeah.
then I have the categories of neo-paganism, which under neo-paganism comes Wicca and witchcraft, because there are other forms of neo-paganism
Yeah.
like Druidry, and then there's different forms of witchcraft, like or goddess worship, like
Okay.
Dianic, which is worshiping the goddess Diana.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's Italian witchcraft, Celtic witchcraft, German witchcraft. There's just so many. You wouldn't
So many
believe.
flavors.
Oh, there's so many. It's kind of like,
That's
Satan is sort of the ultimate Baskin Robbins purveyor. He's like,
yeah. Yeah. Right. That's
if you can imagine a Baskin, or a ice cream shop that
yeah.
has so many flavors that you can't even count them, that's
Yeah.
kind of what Satan
Yeah.
has.
I was gonna
He's
say it
got
sounded like a candy store, like
yeah,
you just
he's got that in Wicca and witchcraft. There's fairy witchcraft. There's green witchcraft. There's so many. It's like,
wow.
I don't even know if you can count them all. And in
That's
the New
wild.
Age, you have a lot of different blends. So that can, it's a smorgasbord.
Yeah.
So Wicca and witchcraft are very here and now focused, very much focused on nature. Nature is sacred. Nature is the model for everything. What happens
Yeah.
in nature is always good.
Right.
So,
Right.
and so the whole idea is harmonizing with nature.
Right.
And that's a little different from the New Age. See, even though the
Yeah.
New Age will be big on maybe on Mother Earth and the energy of the earth, there's a difference, somewhat of a difference to it.
Yeah.
And then Satanism is a whole other, its own category that
Right.
really is separate from all of them.
Yeah.
And so, I talk about all these areas. But that's kind of a big overview on how I categorize everything.
Yeah. Yeah. It sounds like every one of those different things could have their own episode.
Yeah,
So,
that's
it's
true. They
it,
could.
there's so much to it. It's so nuanced. It seems.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you named Gnosticism and New Thought, and it seems to me that a lot of this stuff comes from that kind of second
Mhm.
century Gnosticism, esoteric or secret knowledge, and it also kind of just takes me back to the Garden of Eden. It just seems like it's very wrapped up in the very first lie that we were ever told, and that was that we could be like God. And that seems to be, and maybe not for everybody in that movement, but that seems to be the attraction, is that we can be our own kind of autonomous God, and that's what is drawing us into this. Like, we have our own
Yeah.
secret knowledge, and we can be like God. And so it's like we're still falling for the same lie that we fell for in the in
In the
creation.
beginning. Yeah.
Um, and it also it's just like the whole Gnosticism thing, and even with New Age, and like Christ consciousness, which I know you didn't bring up, but I know I brought that up earlier, and we'll probably get into that. But it
Yes.
seems to just confuse the gospel. It makes it so much more confusing than it needs to be. It's like you're a sinner, repent, trust alone in Jesus, and everything else as far as theology and doctrine will fall into place after that. But it seems to just really confuse this stuff. And so what are your thoughts on Gnosticism? Like, do you think that New Age, and I guess all of the different nuanced things you kind of brought up, do you think that is directly linked to Gnosticism? Is that where it kind of was bred?
Yeah, yes, Gnosticism definitely is a central component of the New Age. And you mentioned secret knowledge. It's not just the secret knowledge, but it's also the very sharp distinction between spirit and matter,
Mm,
which was in the Gnostics, which is actually a teaching of the very early Gnostics, even before the second century in the church. In the first century,
mm.
there was this distinction between because they believed that the material world was evil because it had been
Oh,
created
right.
by this bad god called the demiurge.
Yeah.
And so
Like Satan
the
was the
idea
good guy
was,
or something, or
huh?
is what was that one of the I've always heard people say, Satan was the good guy in the story.
Yes, I don't know if that teaching was in the first century or not. I'm not sure when that teaching came about, but yes, that was a Gnostic teaching that
Yeah.
Satan was an angel who was trying to give wisdom to man,
Right. Right,
and
right,
so he was vilified for that.
right,
So Satan is seen in Luciferianism, which is different from Satanism,
right,
is a view that Lucifer was an angel of wisdom who was trying to give wisdom to man.
right.
And so they believe that he really was the angel of light
Mhm.
and trying to give wisdom to man, and the bad God, punished man for trying to get wisdom and punished Lucifer.
Right, right.
That's a very general, it's a lot more complicated, but that's a very general idea of Luciferianism. So Luciferianism also is very Gnostic in that sense.
Yeah.
Satanism is different. Satanism embraces Satan as a symbol of rebellion.
Aren't
Um,
most Satanists atheists, from my understanding?
yes, yes, most Satanists are atheists, and they believe that Satan represents being independent of any moral code and any moral
Oh,
authority.
right.
So you basically don't have to abide by, in other words, trying to be good. If you want to try to be a good person based on the morals that you see in the culture around you, that's you're being a sheep, you're being a follower, you're not thinking for yourself. The whole idea is that you are actually independent of that, and you can decide your own moral code.
Yeah,
So
right,
it's
right.
very, very rebellious against any form of moral authority,
Yeah.
anywhere. And that's Satanism, which is different from
Well,
Luciferianism,
it's
where they
almost,
will embrace the idea of having wisdom and maybe not being good, but it's just a different view of Satan.
yeah,
And
yeah,
it's
yeah.
not it's not like this rebellious view. But and the Luciferians, the early New Agers, one of the early New Age people was a Luciferian.
Okay.
And his name is he's still alive, David Spangler.
Oh,
He
okay.
wrote a book called The Call, and he wrote a few other books. He was one of the early New Age voices
Mm,
that was starting in the 60s.
yeah,
And his writings also, I think he was influenced by Theosophy. So there
yeah.
is an influence
And
from
that
like
was,
Theosophy and Dave Spangler on the
yeah,
New Age.
and that
Um,
that that came from,
Theosophy was Madame Blavatsky,
Yeah,
who
yeah, yeah.
founded it in the 1800s.
Yeah.
And now Theosophy itself was based on a lot of Eastern views mixed in with supernatural stuff.
Right,
And
right.
it had a huge influence. The reason I don't mention that when I talk about the three main influences on the New Age is that the Eastern spirituality sort of was also part of Theosophy. But
Yeah.
Theosophy was a central influence on the modern New Age movement.
Right, right.
So I recommend anybody who wants to read a really good, entertaining book on it. It's not dry or academic at all. You would probably enjoy it, Mark. It's
Yeah.
called Madame Blavatsky's Baboon.
Okay.
And there's a reason it's called that.
Yeah.
And the author's name's gone out of my head, but you can find it with that title.
Madame
Because there's
Blavatsky's
no other book with
Baboon.
that. There's no other book with that title.
Yeah, that's got to be the
It's
only
one
one.
of the most entertaining books I've ever read. He goes into Theosophy, the different leaders of
Yeah, yeah.
Theosophy, and tells the story. That organization was such a mess. They were always having fights. People were always leaving. It's really kind of hilarious. It's sad, but it's hilarious.
Yeah. That sounds
And
good.
that also will give you an understanding of the New Age too, because a lot of the people in Theosophy influence the New Age. So
Yeah.
that's a good book to read.
Yeah.
There are other books on Madame Blavatsky that are more academic, but that's just a fun one, a fun layperson book
Yeah.
to read. So, so you have this Gnosticism. So even today in the New Age, I was going to say the early church was encountering this teaching that Jesus was not in a real human body because they believed the body was bad because it was
Yeah.
material and
Yeah.
only the spirit was good. So Jesus only appeared to be in a body, and that was called Docetism.
Yeah.
DOCE. You probably come across that,
Yeah, yeah.
Docetism.
Yep.
And so that's why you have things like in First John where it says, what we have seen, what we have touched, what we've, heard. And it mentions that like 2 or 3 times, what we have seen, what we have touched, the
Yeah.
word, and then it says the word of life, referring to Jesus.
Yeah.
So I always read that passage when I'm giving a talk on Gnosticism. I like to read that passage because
Yeah.
or I don't really do a whole talk on Gnosticism, but when I'm talking about the components of the New Age and I'm talking about that as a component,
Yeah.
I read that because that's where he's refuting it and saying, no,
Right.
Jesus really was in a real body.
Yeah.
And there are other passages in the New Testament that are addressing some of those Gnostic
Well,
beliefs.
Thomas touching Jesus and,
Thomas touching Jesus. Yeah, and then Colossians, there's something about it. And there's another, I think in several places in John and First John, it addresses some of the early Gnostic beliefs, refuting them.
Yeah.
So, of course, if Jesus was not in a real body, then he wasn't fully man. Then
Right,
he
right.
could not have atoned for our sins on the cross because
Yeah.
he had to be
Yeah.
flesh and blood to atone for our sins. So
Right.
you see right away, that's an attack on the atonement.
Right,
It's
right.
attack on who Jesus was, and it's attack on the atonement. And so in the New Age today, they don't say the material world is evil, but they tend to say it's a denser energy. Everything is energy. And
Yeah.
so there's a pure energy that is the total spiritual energy way above. And then as that energy comes down into the material world, it gets denser and denser and denser and denser. And
Okay.
therefore, the vibration is lower. So lower vibration means less spiritual. And so
Okay.
what you as a person want to do is you want to raise your vibration.
Hmm.
And you do that through different spiritual practices and through diet.
Oh, yeah.
So the diets, for some people, they really get into these diets, like the fruit only diet, where you're eventually just living only on fruit. I don't know if you actually can live that long just on fruit, but the idea is that if you can get to that point, your vibration will be much higher. But
Mm.
you start off with giving up certain things and then working your way up to this higher vibration diet. And the ultimate is to be a breatharian, which is where you're living on air and light. Well, actually, if you try
That's
that,
fun.
you aren't going to live very long.
Yeah, that doesn't sound like a diet I would tell
and
anybody to
and there's a
try.
few people who have tried it who
You
died
don't
doing
say.
that. But I knew people who wanted to be breatharians and who thought that was the way to go. So now that's a kind of, I want to say that is kind of a fringe view. That's not a common view in the New Age. You don't find a lot of
Yeah,
people who want
sure.
to be breatharians. You don't even find a lot of people just trying to live on fruit. You just,
Yeah.
but there is this idea of, since everything is energy, food has energy. So some of the foods have a higher vibration than other foods.
Okay.
Everything is a higher or lower vibration. So to get yourself meditating raises your vibration. So doing like Eastern meditation raises your vibration.
Okay.
Using natural clothing, like it's not
Yeah.
synthetic, that raises your vibration.
Right, right.
Like when I was married, my husband, my former husband, who was in the New Age, and we didn't have plastic. We didn't use plastic. We
Yeah.
didn't have plastic containers because
Yeah.
plastic is a lower form of energy.
Yeah.
And when our son was born, we only put like 100% cotton clothes on him. He
Oh,
had
right.
no clothes that were not 100% cotton. We told my parents, um, if you buy
Yeah.
any clothes for Jeffrey, they have to be 100% cotton. So my parents basically just gave us money to buy the clothes. They didn't want to.
Yeah, yeah.
They were
They didn't
like,
want to get it
okay,
wrong.
we're not gonna try to find these clothes that you want. So here's the money, go buy them. So this thinking, I had that thinking. So I know what it's like to think like that. And that's very Gnostic.
Yeah.
That comes from the spirit, material spirit duality.
Yeah.
And everything's spirit is spiritual and good. So everything's spiritual in the New Age. I have an article on my website called Everything is Spiritual in the New Age,
Yeah,
to try
okay.
to help people understand the New Age worldview.
Yeah.
Because that worldview means also your body. See, you have your material physical body, but when you're sick, it's because of the invisible body.
Right.
So the invisible body is these different energies in you, which might be the chakras, the chi or ki that's flowing through the invisible meridians, the channels for chi in the body. That's the basis of acupuncture. And then you've got the energies around the field of energy around your body, and all of that has to be treated when you're sick. So that's why I am so vocal in my warnings of these New Age alternative healing methods, because they're based on a completely false view of the body.
Yeah.
So, why go to somebody who has that kind of view and who's
Right.
treating you this
Yeah.
energetic body that doesn't really exist?
Yeah, yeah.
So, yeah, so Gnosticism is a big part of that New Age
Right.
worldview.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. It runs runs very deep. So we also talked about new thought, and so
Yes.
from my understanding, again, like I said, I didn't know that there was even something called new thought. I just thought it was all, I thought new thought and new age were kind of the same thing, but I recently came across a video by Melissa Doherty, who I'm sure you're
Right.
probably familiar with,
Oh,
and she,
I know her. Melissa and I know each
yeah,
other. Yeah.
okay, yeah, yeah, she's got a lot of really awesome stuff, and
Yep.
I was
Yep.
watching the
She
video where
does.
she kind of breaks down new age and new thought, and she was talking about how new thought is kind of more disguised as a Christian thing, where I guess they borrow certain ideas from Eastern mysticism or from the New Age, and they mix it into Christian belief. Um, am I understanding that correctly? Or
No, I would say in terms of how New Thought started, that isn't how it started.
yeah,
New Thought is a movement with a it has a distinct history, but it's a complicated history.
yeah,
Um, like
they all
everything
seem to be. Yeah,
they all seem to be, yeah. And
yeah,
this area is always like so mixed up and complicated. But New Thought did start as a movement, um, it really visibly started more in the 1800s, but the roots of it go back to a man named Swedenborg in the 18th century. And
Mm-hmm.
Swedenborg, who was Swedish and lived in Sweden, I think had been raised in the Lutheran Church.
Okay.
But he said that angels started visiting him, and these angels were giving him messages. And he was a
Okay.
very prolific writer. In fact, you can go online and find all these things written by Swedenborg
Yeah.
for free. At least a few years ago, when I was looking him up, I already knew about him, but I was looking him up because I had a man who was a follower of Swedenborg posting on my Facebook page and
Oh,
arguing
all
with
right.
me that Swedenborg really taught Christianity. And so we got into these long discussions, and I was looking up Swedenborg's writings to read for myself, and I found a lot of them. So Swedenborg was getting messages from angels, and the messages, basically, some of the ideas from these messages were that heaven and hell are not places, but they're all in your mind.
Mm,
Okay. So they don't really exist. He denied the Trinity. The Trinity is false, according to
mm-hmm.
Swedenborg. So there you go. Right away, you've got an essential of Christianity being
Yeah.
denied. Yeah.
Even if
Um,
an angel from heaven preaches a new gospel,
yeah.
it
Yeah.
seems like
Galatians 1, I think 7 and 8 or something like
yeah,
that. Yeah.
it's crazy to me that so many different religions are started on this, well, an angel came to me and spoke to me idea.
Yes.
It's
Yes.
like,
There's
well,
a
did
lot.
you not read what the Bible says about that?
Well,
Because right, Mormonism, right.
Mormonism,
Yeah.
there's a lot of that communication from these spirit beings,
Yep.
these angels, um, and and they're bringing these messages, of course, that are completely false. But
Right.
Swedenborg believed in all this, and he was
Yeah.
writing it all down, and he was, writing. I'm not sure if he was actually teaching people, but I think he was. I can't remember, but I know he was writing this down, and all these writings were influencing people. And so the other idea he had was that your illness comes from your thoughts.
Oh,
So if
yeah,
you're
right.
ill, it's because of the way you're thinking. So
Yeah.
those kind of became the seed of New Thought in the 1800s, which was mixed in at the time with spiritualism.
Mhm.
Now, I'm trying to think of the name of the book. There's a very, very good book on this that I read a couple of years ago. It's like over 500 pages. But if you're really interested in this area, that's the book to read. It's a history of metaphysical belief systems in the United States, and it's called The Republic of Something. I'm going to have to look it up. The Republic of
Yeah.
Something.
If you
And
find it, email it to me. I'll definitely check it
okay,
out.
and I remember the name of the author though. Her name is Catherine with a C, Albanese, Albanese, and she is a professor of religion. So
Oh, okay.
she's an academic. She's not just an amateur who did
Yeah.
research and wrote. Not that that would be bad, but
Sure,
she
yeah.
does have credentials.
Sure.
It's very well, lots of footnotes. She has her sources in the book. It's a fascinating book. I wish I had time actually to read it again, but I have so many other books to read that I'm not going to be able to read
I
it again.
I
But
feel your pain.
she shows how it started. It got mixed in with spiritualism, which was also a movement in the 1800s, which involved communication with the dead. And the roots of New Thought were in spiritualism. And so there was a communication with the dead and these ideas that came from Swedenborg and then other people. Phineas Quimby was one of them.
Yeah, I know that name.
Anton Mesmer actually was before Phineas Quimby. Anton Mesmer claimed to heal, and he claimed he could heal with this thing he called magnetic fluid, which actually was an energy or a force that came from the planets. And
Oh,
he
okay.
claimed that he could channel this and heal with people with it. And so healing was a big part also of early New Thought.
Okay.
And I think Mesmer actually was in the late 1800s. Maybe he died in the I mean, the late 1700s. Maybe he died. He died in the 1800s. I think he crossed from one century to another. And then Quimby was later in the 1800s, and Quimby influenced Mary Baker Eddy, who started the Christian Science Church. And Quimby claimed to have understood that how Jesus healed. And he said, I understand the science of how Jesus healed. And that's why, and he called it Christian Science,
Yeah.
because it was the science of how Jesus healed. And that's what became the
Yeah.
Christian Science Church through Mary Baker Eddy.
Okay.
And then the other two big New Thought churches were the Church of Religious Science was started by two brothers, Ernest and Fenwick Holmes. And they started the Church of Religious Science. This was also based on New Thought. Now, before I say that, I should say what New Thought really is. New Thought is a belief that we are from God, and so we're always connected to God.
Right.
We're always connected to God. Jesus was a man just like us who discovered his divine nature. And when he realized his divine nature, he reached Christ consciousness. So
Okay.
Christ
Yep.
consciousness comes from New Thought.
And so does
And
also, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. It
no,
was
that's
just making
okay.
me think. I didn't want to forget. Is this
Yeah.
also where like the law of attraction comes from as well?
The law of attraction comes from New Thought too. Yeah.
Okay.
And I'll get to that in a second, because that
Yeah.
plays into it too. Yeah. That's all all of that is New Thought.
Okay.
And so Christ consciousness started in New Thought. So everybody can have Christ consciousness because everybody can come to a realization of their own divinity.
Right. Right.
But all these people were using the Bible because it was a heavily Christian culture. Even if
Yeah.
not everyone was Christian, it was a kind of a Christian culture. I mean, it's very common for people to be going to Christian churches. And so it was Christianized. These teachings were blended with Christianity, and they used the Bible, and they talked about Jesus, and they talked about God. But of course, it is not Christianity.
Right.
And they didn't teach that for example, they didn't say you needed to be saved, and they didn't teach that sin is real. Sin
Yeah.
is not real. So this was all part of New Thought, which was looking a lot like Christianity because they use a lot of Christian language and they refer to
Okay.
the Bible.
I got you.
And so then the one of the other movements was the Holmes brothers, the Church of Religious Science, and the focus that Ernest Holmes taught was affirmations, where you say things because they believe that, like Swedenborg said, it's all in your mind. So the teaching became what you think actually comes into reality, and what you
Yeah.
speak comes into reality. So that was
Right.
a big component. And Ernest Holmes was very big on that. And the affirmations were something, as far as I know, is what he came up with, which is very big today. And the New Age, see, the reason this all sounds like the New Age is because the New Age, New Thought is one of the areas the New Age drew from. So
Yeah.
the
Okay.
New Age got Christ consciousness and affirmations, and what's called the law of attraction, which it was never called that when I was in the New Age. That's a more
Yeah.
recent term, but
I
the
got you.
idea was still there, that you manifest things through
Yeah.
your thinking and everything.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that all comes from New Thought and migrated into the New Age. But the New Age has that, but the New Age goes beyond that and is bigger than that.
Yeah.
So what I like to say is New Thought and New Age are two distinct movements with their distinct histories. But because the New Age drew from New Thought, there's a lot of overlap. And there's
Yeah.
a lot of people who, are New Agers, but they are using New Thought ideas. And then there's people who are very much New Thought followers, like Oprah,
Yeah.
who are very open to New Age ideas, but don't necessarily, as far as I know, Oprah does not believe in reincarnation, for example.
Okay. Yeah.
So she's not really a true New Ager, but she very much is open and agrees with a lot of New Age ideas.
Yeah.
And that's because of her New Thought thinking. She was influenced by a Unity minister, which is the third New Thought church, Unity was started by Charles and Myrtle Fillmore, who were a married couple. Myrtle Fillmore had been influenced by Christian Science, and
Okay.
Charles Fillmore was influenced by Buddhism and Eastern religions. And they started the Unity School of Christianity, which actually had another name before that. They were just teaching and putting out this little magazine. And then they started a church, and now it's just called Unity. But
Okay.
they were influenced by the New Thought and Eastern religions. And so in Unity, Jesus is a spiritual master. Um, and it has very, it has the New Thought ideas. But what's interesting is that the Unity Church today disavows any linkage with the New Thought movement. They will say they already were saying we're not New Age, because people, I think, were calling them New Age, and they kept saying no, we're not New Age. And
Yeah.
then they started saying we're not New Thought, but actually they are. They actually
Yeah.
they actually do come from the New Thought movement. But all these churches, Christian Science, Unity, and Church of Religious Science, have their own take on
Yeah.
New Thought. So they're a little different. Christian Science, especially, is very different from the other two. It's more cultic and has these very distinct teachings from Mary Baker Eddy.
Yeah.
But they're still part of New Thought. And the New Thought is in the culture, and the way we see it in the culture is in these motivational teachings,
Yeah.
like Tony Robbins.
Yeah.
All these ideas that you can be whatever you want to be. You can access this energy within you and be anything you want. You have this power within you.
Yeah.
This is all coming from New Thought. And it's also, you find it in the New Age, but it's specifically more New Thought based. And so this culture, as you know, is a very, very big self-help culture.
Yeah. Yeah.
Much more so than you find like in Europe. It's much bigger here in the United States. And the self-help culture and the motivational teachings are huge here. So New Thought is very American, and it fits in with the American culture because we're a very individualistic,
Yeah.
pull yourself up by your bootstrap type culture, which is not the kind of culture in Europe, because Europe
Yeah.
is influenced by all the monarchies they had and the class system. There was more of a class system in Europe because of their history. And whereas the United States started with people leaving other countries and coming here to make their fortune and explore and
Yeah.
do new things. So we're kind of this frontier mindset of let's go out there and conquer, let's go out there and discover, I can do anything sort of thing. So
Yeah. Yeah.
New Thought fits in very, very much with that American spirit, that American attitude that we have. And that's why New Thought's so successful in this country.
Yeah. It even seems like it's kind of I know people will ask, what's the biggest threat to the church in America, and a lot of people they'll have different answers. I think
Mm-hmm.
at one point it used to be, a lot of people would say atheism and things like that, but I'm starting to think that things like New Thought might be a bigger threat because they seem to be kind of infiltrating a lot of churches.
They are, and because the claim, New Thought always claimed to be Christian. They always
Yeah.
claim, whereas the New Age doesn't.
Yeah. Right. Right.
You might find New Agers who say they're Christians or something like that, but
Yeah.
generally speaking, the New Age doesn't try to claim
Yeah.
Christianity. It'll mix, it'll draw from Christian.
Yeah.
It'll draw from the Bible, of course, and completely reinterpret it to look credible, but it
Yeah.
doesn't try to say it's Christian, whereas the New Thought movement does say we're Christians. And
Yeah.
so it's more deceptive. And
Right.
also, as far as atheism, I never thought atheism was a threat. I always
Yeah.
thought that was very, very, I don't actually think there are that many atheists. I think
There's
there are more
not.
agnostics than atheists.
Yeah. I
And
think
I
so too.
never, even when atheism was kind of popular on campuses and everything, and yes, it was a threat. It can always be a threat, but I never saw it as a big threat because people tend to want to be spiritual. They want something
Yeah.
spiritual. And
Yep.
I always felt the New Age was much bigger than atheism.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the culture was much more infiltrated by the New Age than by atheism.
Yeah.
And actually now people are acknowledging it. They're saying
Sure.
atheism is not the threat that we thought
Yeah.
it was. And now we have to come up with different tools to address all these new spiritualities, which is what I've been doing since 1998.
Right.
And that's what I've been watching grow in the culture. It has just mushroomed,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's in the church too. And the new thought stuff, the new thought element is in the church. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you kind of hit on something where, talking about atheism not really being so much a threat. Yeah, it's definitely a pretty low percentage of at least in America of people that would
Yeah. Yeah.
actually
At least
call
in the United
themselves
States.
atheists.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you said people have this kind of almost you didn't use the word, but it kind of seems like this intrinsic feeling toward wanting to be spiritual, and it just makes me think like, yeah, because God created us to worship, and we will
Yes.
we will always find something to worship. We will find whether or not it's the one true God of the Bible, or it's ourselves, or it's whatever, I mean, we will find something to worship, and we see that in almost everybody that we know, that everybody worships something. There's always an idol in somebody's life, and it's just very prevalent with what you just said, just that we are we're attracted to spiritual things,
Yes.
and
Yes.
yeah, it's kind of scary, you see it in the church. You see guys like you mentioned motivational speakers, and it kind of makes me think of like Joel Osteen, because I think he's
Yes.
better a better motivational speaker than he is a pastor.
Yeah.
But
I agree with you. Yeah.
you know,
Yeah,
yeah,
when you listen to him, and I started listening to him because when he was getting popular, people were asking me about him.
yeah,
What do you
yeah,
think of Osteen? So I'm like, okay, I need to start watching some of his sermons,
yeah, sure,
which at the time I was actually watching on television. I think it's before I was on computers, and I was watching some of his sermons on and what he actually technically he's Word of Faith.
yeah, right, yeah,
His father John Osteen had been Baptist, but he left the Baptists and embraced Word of Faith teachings. I don't know if he was influenced by Kenneth Hagin or somebody, but
yeah,
he became a Word of Faith teacher, and Joel Osteen grew up under that. So
yeah,
technically he's Word of Faith, but he's his Word of Faith teachings are really much more like New Thought. The way he talks about them, it's
yeah,
very much like New Thought.
right,
And he's, what I heard him say in a Easter sermon one time was when I was watching to try to figure him out. He said that Jesus had to go to hell and fight Satan. Well, that's a Word of Faith doctrine.
right,
That
right,
Jesus had to go to hell, had to become like a worm and go to hell and fight
yeah,
Satan.
yeah,
And so there was like a big battle between Jesus and Satan and hell, which is so crazy, but that's a Word of Faith teaching. And
sure,
I heard him say that with my own ears. And I was like, oh, wow. There it is. There's the heresy
yeah,
that
yeah,
up until then he'd been saying things that weren't biblical, but they weren't really, you couldn't really be sure that
yeah,
they were heretical.
right,
This
right,
was heretical. And I'm like,
yeah,
okay, now I can tell people he's a heretic.
yeah,
But
okay,
he has these motivational type teachings, I agree with you, that are very
yeah,
much like New Thought. Yeah. And
yeah,
it could be
very,
he's been influenced. It could be he's been influenced by some New Thought,
yeah,
writings. I mean, I don't know, but it's possible. You know who else is influenced by New Thought? Very, very big. He's not a Christian, but unfortunately, a lot of Christians used to think he was Christian. And a lot of Christians still like this guy. I think he's so dangerous, is Glenn Beck. I don't think
uh,
he's as popular as he used to be. He's not only a Mormon, but
mm,
he wrote a book called with a New Thought psychiatrist or psychologist, Keith Blow. He wrote a book called The Seven Wonders of something that I have a article on my website. I actually
Okay.
wrote an article on it. It's a very New Thought book.
Mm.
And Glenn Beck, and I find a lot of Mormons are into New Thought or New Age. A lot of Mormons, because
Yeah.
Mormonism, actually, there's elements of Mormonism that are very much like New Age. They're very,
Okay.
very
Yeah.
similar. And that's why I could always talk to Mormons who came to the door better than Jehovah's Witnesses. When they used to
Yeah. Yeah.
come to my door in an apartment where I lived almost every week, I would have Mormons and Jehovah's
Okay.
Witnesses who came every weekend. Oh, the Mormons would even come on the week. They would come on the weekday evenings, the Mormon missionaries. So I had a lot of talks with with them, and I always felt like I was kind of talking to a New Ager. And
Oh, yeah.
I had learned some things about the Mormon religion, so you know, I was prepared for certain ideas, but it was easier talking to them than the Jehovah's Witnesses, who are to me more narrow, and their view is very different from Mormons. But anyway, I tried, I tried
Yeah.
to do what I could. So yeah, so this I forgot what we were saying. I'm sorry. I got off into the Mormons and the Jehovah's
Oh,
Witnesses.
no, yeah, no, we were just kind of,
Oh, the
I think
motivational stuff.
yeah,
Oh, we
yeah,
were
talking
talking
about
about, and I was talking about Glenn Beck.
Glenn
Yeah,
Beck, yeah.
that's what got me. That's what got me into the Mormon. He's also very big on conspiracy theories. Oh, I could go on and on about Glenn Beck. I used to post warnings on him all the time, which a lot of people did not like. And people actually argued with me. He's a Christian, and I found his testimony
Yeah,
on
yeah.
YouTube where he talks about becoming a Mormon. And I
Right, yeah,
posted it, and I said he's a Mormon. And
yeah.
then some people still, even after I did that, some people said, "Oh yeah, but he thinks he's a Mormon, but he's really a Christian."
Either
I'm
what?
like, no, no,
No.
please face the facts. He is
Well,
a Mormon.
there's a lot of people that still think I mean, I know people personally that, and, at least until we talked, that they just thought that Mormonism and Jehovah's Witnessism was just another denomination of Christianity,
Yes.
like,
Yeah,
they
that's
didn't even
true.
really know that there was a difference, and
That's true.
that's kinda scary too, because
Yeah,
how easily can somebody just get, pulled in that direction, you
yeah,
know?
yeah. I mean,
So
yeah, when I was a brand new Christian, I thought Mormonism was another kind of like, I
yeah,
thought it was kind of like another part of Christianity. And then
yeah.
my first Christian friends that I met when I had been a Christian for about three and a half months or something, um, you know, told me, I don't know how it came up, but somehow it came up, and they were like, they set me straight right away. They're like, no,
Yeah,
Marcia, it's
yeah,
not Christianity at all. And
yeah,
I knew a little bit because my mother had a Mormon coworker when I was in high
uh,
school, and the coworker gave my mother the book that they use. The book, what is it?
Book of Mormon?
Book of Mormon. Yeah, is that what
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
called? For some reason, that
They
didn't
well,
sound right.
there's another one,
Well, they have these writings called the Doctrines and Covenants, but it's a little
yeah, yeah,
book
yeah.
that's like their main little thing. And she gave it to me, and I remember looking through it, and it had a picture of Jesus in the United States talking to these Native
Yeah,
Americans,
yeah, yeah.
and I was like, "Oh, I didn't know Jesus came to the United States," and
Yeah,
I didn't think he had. I didn't believe it,
right, yeah,
but
yeah.
I thought it was really weird. So after that, my idea of Mormonism was, well, they're Christians, except that they think Jesus came to the United States.
You kinda have, like, a crazy history
Yeah,
there,
kind
yeah.
of like a little additional story there about Jesus. And that was kind of my thinking. That was pretty much all I knew about the
Yeah,
Mormons until my friends set me straight. And then
sure,
later
sure.
I learned more when I went to these conferences to speak, because there were a lot of people that did ministries to cults, and talked about the cults like Mormonism. And so I
Yeah.
learned a lot more. But yeah, there are Christians who really don't know what the Mormons believe. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, because they use a lot of the same terminology, it's just
Yes,
that they mean
exactly.
completely different things by it, so if you're talking
Exactly.
with a Mormon or a Jehovah's Witness, you almost have to get them to define terms,
Yes.
when you're talking to them to kinda clarify what it is that they're actually talking about because it'll sound very it'll sound very much like um, the terminology that you're used to as a Christian, but
Yeah,
if
it
you,
will sound like it. It will sound
yeah.
very much like it. I mean, they'll talk about, the Mormons will talk about Jesus dying on the cross,
Oh,
and
yeah, yeah.
and they have this big Christmas thing every year. There's a big
Yeah.
Mormon temple in
Yeah,
Maryland,
right. Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
it's huge, and they have this big Christmas thing every year where they have the live, the animals and the Mary and Joseph, actors playing Mary and Joseph in
Sure.
the stable with the animals, etc. And it's a big thing. So yeah. So things that look like Christianity they're more deceptive, like New
Yeah.
Thought.
Oh,
And
yeah.
the New Age can sound Christian. It can be very deceiving. And even if it's not sounding Christian, some of the ideas in it sound harmless, because the New Age is always positive and always sounds beneficial,
Sure.
always. And
Right.
so a lot of the remedies that it offers, whether mental or physical, will be New Age, but it sounds very appealing, and people who are searching, or even the spiritual ideas, will sound good. Because I talk to a lot of Christians who get sucked into some New Age ideas.
Oh, yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's very prevalent. So, I don't wanna take up, too much of your time here and, before I, gotta
Well,
skedaddle and get
it's
get
really
the
up to
kids.
you, because
Yeah.
I'm used to talking for a while. I pretty much can talk really, really easily up to 2 hours. After that, I start to get tired and a little hoarse. But
Yeah.
however long you want to go, if this is already almost an hour and a half, so
Mhm.
it might be. Sometimes it's too much information. Like
Yeah,
some
well,
people don't want to listen sometimes to a real long, thing, and
yeah. Kinda
I don't
cut
know.
chop
So,
it up into little sections,
or you
for
can,
people.
yeah, or you can put it into 2 segments or 3
Yeah.
segments or whatever.
Yeah, who knows?
That's a possibility too. So,
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
because there's
Um,
just so much information in this
I
area.
know. It really is. It's making me think, I wanna do another episode on some of these things.
Oh yeah. Oh,
Just
I'll be
yeah,
happy I'll be
yeah,
happy to do that.
yeah, that'd be great. Just maybe focus on that. I didn't realize there's just so much to all of these things, and you just do a deep dive on in Satanism or Luciferianism or something. Um, but yeah, what would you say, to somebody that's either watching or listening, and maybe there's somebody who is influenced by New Thought, or maybe somebody who's in the New Age or has been influenced by the New Age. What would you say to them as a Christian
Okay.
now?
Okay. Okay. What I would say is that, as enticing as the New Age can be, and I know it can be very enticing and very interesting. I know, because I stayed in it for so long, precisely because it was very interesting and enticing.
Yeah,
And I felt very spiritual, like I was doing spiritual things, like when I did the meditation. I had experiences that confirmed my beliefs, and that's one of the hardest things to deal with, is the experiences. So even if you're having these wonderful experiences when you're meditating or whatever it is, please be aware that the New Age does not have the final answers. The New Age offers many answers, but it has no final answer. It only gives you things that will pull you further in. Like you
mhm,
could never do enough in the New Age. You
right.
know, the idea is that, okay, you're going to have another life, or another 100 or another 1,000 lives to become enlightened, because you can't do this all
Yeah,
in one lifetime.
yeah,
So you never can do enough. You're always on this path. You're always searching. You're reading. You're finding more teachers. You're going maybe to classes. You're studying another aspect of it. But here's all these other aspects out there you haven't gotten to yet. It's just endless. And that's to keep you on this treadmill, this spiritual treadmill. And it's keeping you separated from the true Jesus Christ.
yep,
The New Age Jesus is not the true Jesus. The true Jesus is somebody who came as man and lived as man, who knows what it is like to live as man.
mhm,
He suffered on the cross for you. He suffered to pay for your sins. Now, the New Age doesn't believe in sins. I know that. But a sin is something that we do where we are going against God. God is perfect and God is holy. God is completely untouched by anything wrong. In the Bible, it says God is light and in him there is no darkness at all. And so there's no darkness in God. It's all light. It's all good. It's all perfect. But we can never reach that. It doesn't matter how many lives you think you can live, you will never reach that. And the reason you will never reach that is because you're a person who tends to do things that are wrong. I mean, you can't live a life without doing bad things. Even if it's a tiny bad thing, you're going to do it. A tiny lie, taking a pen from your office.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
That's pretty minor, but it's wrong
Yeah.
if you're not supposed to take a pen from your office. So, there are always these things, and these things separate us from God because God's so holy and righteous that he can't accept anything wrong. If he could accept something wrong, then he could accept another thing that's maybe a little more wrong. And then he could accept maybe, okay, it's okay to steal if you really need something. Okay, it's all right to steal if you've had a bad life, and eventually, you have a God who's accepting things that are bad, but God does not accept anything bad. And the way that you can be forgiven of all these wrong things is by believing in Christ, who came to die for those sins. And he took the punishment for those sins on the cross. And by believing in Jesus, when you believe in the true Jesus, you're forgiven. You're forgiven of your sins. And you are immediately reconciled. That is, you have a relationship with God, and you become adopted into God's family. You become adopted as children of God. I mean, this is in the New Testament. This is not my opinion. This is
Right.
just people who may not know this that are hearing this. You become adopted as a child, and you then have from that moment on eternal life. So even when you die physically, which of course all of us do eventually,
Mhm.
when you
Yeah.
die physically, you will be with Christ, and you are free from judgment on your sins because they've been forgiven in Christ. And so I would urge anybody who is not a Christian listening to this, I would urge you to pick one of the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John, and
Mhm.
just start reading, just like I did. I chose Matthew, but you could pick Mark, Luke, or John, and just start reading in the first chapter and just read a little bit. Read 5 or 10 minutes a day just to see what's there. Don't try to figure it all out, and don't think you have to have some kind of experience. Just start reading it,
Yeah.
because these are the words from God, and he gave those words to us. And just start reading, because God's word is very powerful because it's from God. So it's not a mystical energy, but it's the words from God. So they do have his power in them, in the sense that there is truth in them. So, and if you're a Christian, I would say please be aware that anything in the New Age that's drawing you in is going to damage your relationship with Christ, and it's going to make you not want to read the Bible anymore, or maybe not go to church, and you'll get more interested in these other areas, and it will damage your relationship, and the way that you could be serving the Lord will be, damaged by that.
Yeah.
So if you really love Jesus, please, do away with anything New Age that you've gotten involved in. So, and I have a lot of articles on different areas that it might be drawing you in, like yoga and things
Mhm.
like that, on my website, christiananswersnewage.com.
Yep.
So you can just check those out, and you can email me from there too if you have questions. And I'm on Facebook, and I have a ministry page, Christian Answers for the New Age, on Facebook. You also can send me a message there.
Amen. Yeah, I was just gonna ask you where can people
Oh,
find you online, but it seems like you covered that. So it's christiananswersnewage.com, right?
.com, right.
Okay. I got you. Because I was I think I was trying to type in Christian answers for the New Age or something.com,
Well, it
but
used to be my old website was that, and I don't want to say it because then it'll confuse people. But
yeah,
so when it became the new website, it was and it's on a completely different platform and
yeah,
everything. It's Christian Answers New Age. It's really a blog site, which
yeah.
is why I don't have a table of contents. So um, I do have a search box. So any kind of topic you want to look up, like astrology or yoga, just put that in the search box.
Okay,
And all of the articles and programs, if I've done any on that topic, will come up.
okay,
And you can
okay. That's
just
good to know.
scroll down and look through those.
That's good to know. And you said you're on Facebook as well, right? With
And
Christian
I'm on
Answers.
Facebook. I have a personal page and I have a ministry page, Christian Answers. Now, the ministry page is Christian Answers for the New Age, which is the
Okay,
name of my ministry.
okay,
And
yeah,
so it's very easy to find. It's the only page on Facebook with that name.
yeah.
and I post things related to the New Age and the occult there all the time, quite often. So, if you want to keep up with things that I'm writing about, you can go there.
Okay, great. Yeah, well, yeah, like we said, we'll have to do this again. I'll have to, we'll get back in touch with you
Okay.
and dig deeper on some of these topics because it seems like there's just an endless
It
supply
is.
of information
It is.
for all these things.
It is pretty
Yeah,
much endless. I could just be
yeah,
talking to you and others and just on and on. And I have been doing it for I have
yeah,
been
yeah,
doing it actually
yeah.
started unofficially and part-time in 1994. So,
Okay, yeah,
that is that 30 years? I can't believe it. I think that's 30
yeah,
years ago.
yeah, yep,
So, and see, and not only have I not run out of things, new things keep coming up.
yeah, right, yeah,
So,
yeah,
so like the Enneagram, that was a big thing.
right,
So
right.
new things keep coming up.
Oh
So
yeah,
I'm never going to run out of stuff. I'm going
yeah,
to be, the Lord's going to call me home before this stops, unless Jesus comes back. So
yeah, yeah,
I'm always going to have stuff to talk about.
yeah. Yeah, well, the Enneagram, that'd be a good one to do an episode on too, for sure.
Yep.
So, yeah,
Yep.
we'll have to, like I said, I'll have to get back in touch with you
Okay.
and we can figure out the details. But yeah, no, this has been great. I really appreciate you coming on here. Appreciate you just giving all this knowledge and wisdom for people in the new age. I've learned a lot. I know, like I said, this it hasn't been a big area of study for me. I've dove in a little bit and
Hmm.
it's a very interesting topic and I can, I think I'm going to continue to study it and research it and better understand it because again, where I live, I think I probably have a pretty good chance of coming across these ideas. So um,
Yeah, really, no matter where you live, you'll come across them.
yeah,
There are
yeah, yeah,
areas where it's more prevalent, it seems like certain areas that it's
yeah.
just huge, like Colorado,
Oh yeah,
California, um,
Sedona, Arizona,
Sedona.
right? That's
Yeah,
probably a big
yes,
one.
yeah, Sedona, is huge. There's certain
Sarasota.
areas. Oh, it could be, yeah. Asheville, North Carolina has a lot of new age, a lot of areas that are resort areas, have a lot of people
Okay.
coming,
Yeah,
university towns.
sure.
There's a lot of stuff like up in New York. Like I'm trying to think of, why is the town gone out of my head? It's where Cornell University is.
Oh,
I can't think of the name of it.
me neither.
I've spoken there, and it's gone out of my head, but I do remember Cornell University
Yeah.
and Ithaca. I think it's Ithaca.
Okay, okay.
Yeah. So
It's all
there's
over.
some areas where it's just really, really big. But really, it's everywhere. I mean, Kansas City. I've been to Kansas City, and there's a bunch of New
Oh
Age
yeah.
and witchcraft shops there.
Okay.
Even out in Southern Maryland,
Yeah.
which is a more isolated area. There's stuff there, so it's really everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah. All over the place. All right. Well, cool. All right. Well, brothers and sisters, go out into the world, give a reason for the hope that is in you. Do it lovingly with reverence and respect. And again, Marcia, I appreciate it. And now I know how to say your name, so I won't mess that up.
That's okay.
All right. Well, thanks for being on.
Thank you for having me, Mark. I really enjoyed having
Of
this
course.
discussion with you.
Of course. Anytime.